All right, thanks for joining me tonight. I wanted to do a video and bring awareness on the criminal justice system here in California. I want to point out that while California is a pretty liberal state, when it comes to criminal justice, we're still living in the Stone Age. And case in point, we have these things called the mandatory sentencing guidelines, which include the three strikes law. Maybe you've heard of it. So the three strikes law and other mandatory sentencing guidelines are basically these guidelines that are in place to where if you commit a certain crime and you meet whatever criteria for these enhancements, they can add even more time to your sentence because of that. So the strikes law, it would be a good example of that. There's also like gang enhancements. So like if you did a shooting or something, and they can somehow prove you're a gang member or a gang affiliate, they can add 5 years on top of the 10 years you're going to get for the shooting, for example. Now the three strikes law. Three strikes and you're out. So basically, in a nutshell, it's you commit three strikes, 25 to life. The law was passed in the mid to late 90s, and it was passed ostensibly to get the repeat offenders that were abducting children and the rapists and child fucking kidnappers and those fucking weirdos. That's the story that the media fed to the voters, okay? But that's not really the case. That's just what they used to gain traction to get the law passed. The law was passed to keep people in prison for as long as possible. Why do I say that? Because you need to look at who was behind the three strikes law, who was behind it, who was pushing for it, and who wanted it to get passed the most. And if you do your research and look, you will find that the CCPOA was behind it. The CCPOA is the California Correctional Peace Officers Association, okay? It's the prison guards union. California prison guards are unionized, okay? And their union is incredibly strong. They have the best, highest paid lobbyists in the state, and they have a lot of pull and a lot of clout when it comes to the California legislature. So they're behind these laws. Now, if you look at the three strikes law, while yes, it did include heinous violent charges like, it's supposed to be for like serious violent offenses, right? So yes, it did include kidnapping, torture, rape, armed robbery, assault with a firearm, assault with a deadly weapon, armed robbery, just to name a few. And those are strikeable offenses. But they also lumped in other charges that were not necessarily violent or serious that they kind of just threw in there and swept it in there and just, hoped that everyone would overlook it. And they did, because everyone got so hyped up because the media and the politicians used this poor little girl and her family named Polly Klaas. In the mid-90s, this poor little girl was abducted and I think murdered by a repeat offender named Richard Allen Davis. And they used that situation and that family, and they exploited the hell out of them to get people scared and scaring them into signing for the three strikes law. This guy was a repeat offender. If we don't sign this law, this could happen to your kids. If this law was in place, this little girl would still be alive today. And yes, that might be true. But again, what we're not looking at is what other charges are part of this little program, these nonviolent charges. Like, for example, burglary is a strike. Okay, burglary would be like breaking into someone's house or apartment when they're not home and stealing shit, for example. There's another charge called criminal threats. And if you like threaten to hurt someone or kill someone, like, guy is drunk at a bar, gets into a bar fight and goes, "I'll kill you," as he's walking out the door, he could actually be charged for criminal or terrorist threats, and that's a strike. There's some other nonviolent strikes that were lumped in there as well, and I don't know off the top of my head what those ones are, but the idea, again, is to keep people in prison for as long as possible. Who is going to benefit the most by having many people in prison for as long as possible? Well, of course, the prison guards. Hence, the union, the CCPOA, and everyone behind the three strikes law, and on top of that, other mandatory sentencing laws that have been passed since then and prior to. Okay, the prison guards are going to benefit the most because that's a guaranteed paycheck. You have to understand that the prison guards are the highest paid guards out of any other prison guard in the whole country. Okay, they have the best benefit package out of any other state or federal worker. I'm talking full dental, vision, medical, everything. Best benefits ever. And here's the best part, their pension is going to be 80% of their salary when they retire. So if they retire after 25 years, let's just say they're making $100,000 a year, make it a nice round number. That means for the rest of their life, they're going to get $80,000 a year off top, okay, and keep their benefits. So that's a pretty nice little nest egg that they're going to want to protect. So they passed these laws to keep people in prison for as long as possible. Now you hear the stories of people getting sentenced to life for stealing a pizza or having a DUI, and that's what was happening. So how the strike law works is if you commit a strikeable offense and you get out, Once you commit another offense, whether it's a strike or not, you're going to get a mandatory doubled sentence. So let's say I committed a burglary in the year 2000. I got out in 2002. Let's say in 2010, years and years later, I fucking shoplifted from Walmart, okay? That would normally carry like 16 months for a regular Joe. For me, I would get a doubled sentence of 32 months minimum, all because I have a prior strike on my record that I've already served time for, already paid restitution for, already paid my debt to society on, but they're going to use that to double my current sentence. Furthermore, if I commit a new strike, not only am I going to get a doubled sentence, but then they can tack on a mandatory 5-year enhancement for having a prior strike. If you don't believe me, you can look it up. It's California Penal Code 667.5 subsection C, which states if you commit a strikeable offense, you will get 5 years for every prior strike you have on your record. So if you had 1 prior strike, it's 5 years. If you had 5 prior strikes, it's 25 years, and so on and so on. Of course, your third strike is going to be a mandatory 25 to life for the third strike, plus however many enhancements for your priors, so at least 10 more years in enhancements. So a third strike case would be about 35 to 36 to life. Penal Code 1170 is a 1-year prison prior that they can tack on. Just because you've been to prison before, when you catch a new term, on top of all those other enhancements I just described, they can tack on another 1-year prison prior just by virtue of the fact that you've been to prison before. Okay? So this is what I'm talking about. Does that punishment fit the crime? It's really cruel and unusual under the 8th Amendment, but for some reason it hasn't been changed or challenged. In 2011, they did modify the strike law, because prior to 2011, your third strike could have been any felony, violent or strikeable or otherwise. So that's when a bunch of people were going to prison for life for having 2 prior strikes on their record and committing shoplifting, a DUI, or a simple assault, or they got in a fight at a bar, and they're going off to prison for life because of the 3 strikes law. They did change that in 2011 under Prop 36, so now your third strike has to be a strike. But there's still people serving in these, lengthy prison terms for all these enhancements on nonviolent offenses. And my point is, my whole thing to this is like, let's get some of this shit passed. If you're a child raper or chomo or a fucking rapist or a weirdo like that, of course, this shit should all still apply to you. But if you have strikes for burglary or terrorist threats or fucking evading the police or whatever the other ones were, come on. Does that really warrant a doubled sentence? Like, that's called double and even triple jeopardy, because you've already served your time on those priors. You've already done your time on them. So why are they bringing those up and then imposing additional time for it? It's like you're being punished again and again and again for your priors that you've already served your time on. You've already paid your debt. So punishment does not fit the crime. And in another video, I'll tell you how I, myself, stood there in the courtroom and had the judge look me in the eye and sentence me to 23 years in prison for a non-violent burglary. And that really happened to me. I got sentenced to 23 years. I got sentenced on April 15th, 2015. They sentenced me to 23 years in prison, and off I went. So how am I sitting here today? I'll tell you that story later. But you guys have a good one. I hope I've explained that 3 strikes law and other mandatory sentencing to you. But yeah, it's basically there to keep people in prison for as long as possible. Now here's what the taxpayers didn't realize, but I think they're starting to wake up to now. And maybe if we can spread the word, spread the message. Do you know how much money it costs the taxpayers in California to house an inmate? There's about 100,000 inmates in prison in California, right? Each one of those inmates, it's at least $75,000 a year to house that inmate, to house him, clothe him, feed him, support him, all that. At least $75,000 a year for each inmate, and there's 100,000 inmates in prison. So the more time people spend in prison in California, the more money taxpayers are having to shell out. Now, that money can easily go to other shit, like, why don't we fix these fucking roads that we have out here? Potholes everywhere. Why don't we fix those roads? Why don't we build more schools? Okay? Why don't we get the kids in the disenfranchised school districts better textbooks? I'm just saying, we could spend this money on better shit. California has the highest income state tax than any other state. We have the highest income state tax, the highest property tax, and the highest gas taxes. And where's it all going? Fuck if I know, but a lot of it's going to house prisoners for no fucking reason. So it's time to wake up. It's time to make some fucking changes, okay? Now, who's with me?